What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Top 8 of the Month, the September edition, and we're going to dive into a whole lot of different things about where I feel like the fish are transitioning to, the baits that I feel like I'm really going to be utilizing in a lot of different parts of the country, and also the two things I'm going to do this time is I'm actually going to go to two separate lakes. Two lakes that fish completely differently, one more of a highland reservoir and one more of a grass fishery, just to be able to give you guys a little bit more. If you live around an area and there is no grass, then I'm going to have something for you. But if you have a lake that has a lot of grass, we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. So let's jump into it. And first off, let's talk about the lake we are selecting this week. The first lake, that is. And that is going to be Toledo Bend, the giant. On the Louisiana-Texas border, it's huge. I mean, just measuring this thing, let's just measure it real quick here. Just from end to end is a bird fly. It's 53 miles. I mean, it is ginormous. It's got grass. It's got timber. It's got big bass. It's got spotted bass, largemouth, and it's got a lot of diversity of different things from big ridges to timber areas to pockets to creek arms to creek channel edges to main river edges. A lot of cool, one of the coolest fisheries that I fish. I've never had the opportunity to fish it this time of year, but I have some ideas of really what I would go about and some of the things that I would focus on really be and where that would be at. So let's go ahead and finish measuring. A lot of the tournaments in a lot of areas on this place are typically done in the lower half of the lake. So just in general, let's look at, all right, here, let me see if I have. So we're going to look at this place. Obviously, you can tell by the map, those are all symbols for timber. So lots of timber in this lake. You can see some of the boat length. It's definitely a lake that's something unique. But we're going to talk about the first bait that we're going to be throwing on this lake. And the first bait that I'm going to throw, I'm going to pick up the good old trusty flipping stick. 710 extra heavy punching rod, 1 ounce weight. And the reason, one of the biggest things this time of year, September is probably the best month to pick up a big weight and dob. This is a 1 ounce weight with a 4/0 VMC red line flipping hook and one of my favorite little punching baits, and that's a cleanup craw. Green pumpkin blue. A lot of times back in the day, I used to throw a lot of black and blue. I used to go from learned how to punch down in Florida, and I always thought you needed black and blue. Just because, like in Florida, that's what you threw. And learned very quickly that under mats, green pumpkins and your natural colors work just as good. Even though it's a little bit darker underneath there, there's times maybe in the morning that darker colors can matter. But I put a little peg on there, and that 1 ounce weight seems to work pretty well. Picking the right hook is definitely important. One thing that I will also say is I do not snell my hook. If you pole set punching or flipping, so you doop, eep, and you just take your time, a snell knot's a great one, but if you are a slackliner, if you ever slackline, that's the worst case scenario if you have a snell knot. You pop their mouth open a lot of times and you don't hook them as well as I feel like you do just using a Palomar. I used to throw a snell a lot over the years, and there's times that I feel like if I'm really in the flipping mood, like meaning like I'm ready, like I'm really like dialed in punching, and I could take my time. Like the big key is like when you get the bite, you flip in there, sucker gets it, doop, taking your time and like if that sucker's swimming away from you, you got him. But if he's coming to you and you pole set, a lot of times you don't pole set enough, and what happens is that mouth pops open and you miss the fish or lose the fish. Now that can happen on a snell knot and a Palomar knot, so don't think that that's not going to happen ever, because that's typically what happens when you lose fish. You're going to be like, why did I lose that fish? A lot of times it's because that fish sort of decided to swim towards you, and then you're cutting the grass as it's swimming your way, and you don't get tied on him, and that's one of the worst case scenarios. So that being said, I really like a 4/0 hook. I want a little bit more gap, especially in this bait that has a little bit more meat. If you're throwing a little bit thinner profile lure or a little smaller bait, like maybe like even a BB cricket or something like a smaller profile punching bait, then I would downsize to a 3/0. But especially if I'm going to an ounce or ounce and a half, I want a bigger hook overall, because when you have a bigger weight, typically you want it, it goes through there, it has a better chance of popping their mouth open. So then if you have more bite in your hook gap, then you have a better chance of hooking those fish. So that's how I look at it. You can punch with a 7.6, even in like the 2.0 series. There's just an old black ice that I really like for punching. It just has the right kind of feel, kind of vibe for the rod, and it's always one of my favorite punching rods. It's also one of the rods I used down in Florida when I was flipping for them big ones down there. So having a little bit longer rod and being able to set the hook and have a little bit more leverage seems to be a better deal. So let's talk about some of the areas that I'm really going to be focusing on fishing and punching. So let's just sort of slide down to an area, say probably the majority of the grass. One thing I do understand a little bit of how this place sets up. C-Maps has really had a good time in actually mapping with the pre-downloaded map inside of there. So you're not going to see as much detail on this one, but maybe in the later one that we end up showing you later on, we will. So we're going to see a little bit of an understanding of what exactly is going down. So let's just slide into this big creek arm right here. Let me see where I'm at here. Hold on. This is the biggest community area, also well-known grass area on the lake, and that is called Housen Bayou. You can see some big flats on your right-hand side. You see some big creek arms that go back in there. That is going to be probably the area that's going to go down the most. The areas where you have these big, expansive creek channels in those areas, if you have mats on those places, whether on those flats or in the backs of those pockets, wherever it starts to like narrow down, I'll even zoom in. See where it narrows down, like right here, you have this big flat right here. It might be all this is matted really well, and you can just pitch down that creek channel edge. And that's just a little creek channel edge from Big Branch. And you would see a lot of these are probably going to be set up like that. Now, if the grass is out here on these flats, you could find groups out there in the grass and the submerged grass as well. But looking for those matted vegetation, looking for the hydrilla, and being able to flip down through there, you're going to flip a ton of grass in order to finally catch. You'll find a couple fish, right? But then when you find an area that has bass, typically there's quite a few in that zone, and you can sort of slow down and pick it apart and have a good day of bass fishing. So not the fastest way to catch them, but I wanted to talk about it because it is one of my favorite ways. I know this is sort of more on the advanced side. A lot of fishing goes, like it's a little bit more advanced punching. Not everybody gets a chance to do that. So I just wanted to talk about it briefly and go over where I sort of felt like it was going to go down. Sort of something else that I love to do this time of year as well, sort of goes hand in hand with the hydrilla aspect, and we're going to talk about that real quick, is throw a frog. So 7/6 heavy. This frog I bought recently. It's that Swamp Lord. I've not thrown him. Drop a comment below. Let me know if you guys think about this guy. Heard some things about him. I know Jordan's caught some big ones on him in the past. I know some guys who caught some big ones on him. Seems like an interesting frog. I mean, the first thing you're going to do when you check a frog is you're going to make sure he's fairly soft. I mean, the biggest thing is overall is if the frog takes on water and it's hard, you're probably not going to hook up very well when a big one blows up on it. So those are the frogs I do not personally throw. If I feel like I have it compresses really easily, has a good hook in it, those are the frogs that I personally am going to take the time and effort and be like, all right, that's the frog I want to start, throw. Now, there's a lot of different sizes and profiles and colors that you can go and you could throw throwing a frog. But for me, this time of year, it's either like a natural colors for the most part. I'm really not big on white, like bright white. This is sort of off-white. But a very bright white this time of year, especially through a mat, because a lot of times the areas that you're going to get most of your bites frogging are going to be areas that literally have a lot of activity. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of like bluegill smacking, sucking. You can hear the mat has activity. And so that typically brings the bass up in the mat, in that grass bed, to where he's more susceptible. Even if it's like 6 feet of water, he might be a foot or two underneath the surface, and he comes up there and eats your bait. That's what I really like. I also like something that has a little bit broader of a face when I'm throwing a frog on matted vegetation. That's something that I really like as well. So, not saying that it's an interesting frog. I'll let you guys know later on what I think about him. I'm going to throw him a little bit throughout this fall, but definitely 50-pound braid is what I recommend. I feel like you get more distance out of that. 8:3 to 1 gear ratio reel typically. 7/6 what I throw when I'm throwing a mat frog or fishing in open water or like fishing in big, like either lily pad areas or matted vegetation, because you need to have that leverage again. Like when the one blows up way out there, just being able to bring and rotate your whole body is important. So that is the 1-2 punch. I feel like if you have grass in your lakes, it's hydrilla, it's milfoil, you fish up north, before it starts to die off and you get these big cold fronts, September's the best month where it's the healthiest it can be before all the giant cold fronts come through. Even if you had a few cold fronts, those fish are even more so funneling in that grass, and it should be the best month of the year to catch some of your best bass fishing in grass, period, bar none. So hopefully you learned something from this. If you don't have grass, we have something in the second part of this video to where you can talk a little bit more about what's going on. So actually I'm gonna stay on Toledo on this next one real quick here. So if you're not a big grass fisherman and you're trying to utilize forward-facing sonar and you want to know a little bit about forward-facing sonar, where would I start in the month of September? What am I going to be focusing on? First off, let's talk about the bait and the rod that you're going to select. For me, the number one rod, if I'm out there on Toledo Bend, is probably going to be a 7.0 medium. Is what I'm going to throw. 8-pound Suffix Nano. Well, this is actually Revolve braid. Nano braid is something that I've thrown throughout the past. I like a 1/4 to a 3/16 ounce jig head. This is actually the VMC tungsten jig head. I actually been playing around with a loop knot. I've caught them on a loop knot. I've caught them with Palomar, but this is a 1/4 ounce one. I feel like 1/4 is just a good overall size. 3/16 to 1/4 is probably the one that those are the two that I use the most. Overall, probably 12-pound fluorocarbon is what I use. This is actually a prototype fluorocarbon I'm playing around with from Suffix. Always tinkering. And then, like I said, a 7.0 medium heavy, but a faster tip. You can see that rod has a little bit faster tip that really allows for you to have a little more action in your, or impart a little more action into the bait. The key for that to me is just being able to, like, again, be able to move you're imparting action into the overall bait itself, allowing that bait to rock. And there's like a lot of people that are like, there's so many different things now on the market. They're like, oh, this bait rocks and this does this and this does that. It gets very confusing on what to throw and where to go. But day in and day out, I'm just telling you right now, you can't go wrong with a 4 1/4 freeloader, 1/4 ounce jig head, 3/16 ounce jig head, and you go out there and 90-degree to line tie, even if it's not a VMC. VMC is what I like. That tungsten one's a little bit more on the expensive side, but there's some out there that are a little bit less expensive. The hybrid swim bait jig head, you get a little bit more bang for your buck. So there's a lot of different options out there on the market, but don't overcomplicate it, especially if you're just getting into it. There's intricate, you can go crazy every dang spectrum of throwing a minnow, from big ones to small ones to baby weight, minimum weight. It goes all over the place. But starting 3/16 1/4, that's going to be your primary sizes. Just going out there and figuring it out. Now that we put that right here, it's actually a reel that I'm playing around with as well. It's a Cast King Mega Jaws. I put that braid on there today. I wanted to check him out. Interesting. Let's talk about where I'm going to be utilizing this technique. There's 2 places that I'm going to focus on Toledo Bend, where I would focus my time and energy if I'm going to fish for fish that are actually out suspended on bait. Bait fish are more than likely going to be more main lake driven or in the mouths of the creeks. So let's just say there's some bait fish inside a house. So this area, you got all these creek channels. There's probably some timber out in here. And so I might go around this creek channel and try to find the areas that have a plentiful amount of bait. Now, being able to figure out if there's white bass there or largemouth or catfish, a lot of different options. There's a lot of fish that get around bait this time of year, so it can be a little bit more difficult, but starting in the creek arms is probably where I would start, and because you have a confined area. So maybe even starting in a pocket like this guy right here would be a good option because, again, it's confined. You can drop your trolling motor. If you see some bait presence, you see some action, you're able to sort of figure out, okay, hey, there's some bait in here. And you can move around and sort of get a vibe for what's going on. I typically like to idle and utilize my side imaging and side scan. That's just, to me, like how I normally will start. If I can tell there's bait presence around, that's when I'll drop my trolling motor, because otherwise you'll be dropping your trolling motor and fishing for miles without finding maybe anything. Or you might find one here and there and catch one here randomly here, one randomly there. Starting in the confined areas is a good way to sort of get your sort of grasp on what you're looking for, and then sort of once you sort of understand that, maybe getting out here to some more of the main river stuff or main river areas where some of these fish that maybe might have been sitting on these points and are now suspending and they're getting out there in the main river channel chasing bait. Then you can get out there and you can sort of pan around and sort of look around. Active Target 2 is what I personally use. I really like the Lowrance units overall. There's a lot of different options out there that you can use, but it's just figuring out what really works best for you. That being said, that is sort of the rundown of what my mind would be on the good old Toledo Bend. I'd be fishing grass, or I'd be out there in the middle scoping around having a good time. So let's go ahead and transition to a completely different lake in a completely different area. Let's zoom out. Let's see how good I am at finding lakes quickly. Next up is Old Lake Norman. Completely different than Toledo Bend. Not mapped, so if you're expecting to get super crispy maps, I think they probably have a south chip that you probably could get if they mapped, if CMAP did map that, and probably get some contours that look similar to this, but just a heads up, obviously it does not have that. So now we're on the Great Lake Norman. Lake Norman is not going to take as much weight in a 5-fish limit tournament as Toledo Bend is. But it's a highland reservoir that has two things. One, clear water, has, well, lots of different things. It has stripers in it, has spotted bass and largemouth, okay? Completely different than what I would look at is Toledo Bend. Toledo Bend's more of like a lowland reservoir that has, you know, more of like almost like a TVA kind of style lake, but even bigger than the TVA. Norman's sort of I guess it would be lowland still, but it's more like clear water, pressured fish. They see everything out there. They're very smart. There's heron in there, there's threadfin, there's gizzards, there's bluegill. It's sort of a cool lake that has a lot of different options. Let's first sort of go into talking about some of the shallow water fish that I feel like are going to be sort of going on right now in the month of September. Riprap banks, pockets, places that I feel like, say, if I get up here in this middle section of the lake, let's focus and sort of zoom in. You know, I want to get somewhere around a major creek. So here's Mountain Creek right here. I do like short pockets. You guys know, I started talking about last time, I like short pockets to sort of get a vibe on what's going on, because you can just cover so much more water on the main channel running into those short pockets like this guy or that guy, or running into those little half moon places, but also little like sharper places, because Norman's actually a little bit flatter, having a little steeper bank and stuff. Now this doesn't show the docks. Having a little bit steeper, deeper water close by next to a flat could be the way to go. So like I might run the sides of these points. Sometimes the point itself, the actual point on the tip of the point, is not the key. This time of year, it's actually the side of the point, right on the side of him, where those fish will set up. And a lot of times wolf packs of bass will set up on the sides of this point looking for bluegill, shad. There still probably could be some shad, some like bluegill spawn fish going on. To me, that's not going to be my number one thing I'm looking for. I'm just looking for wolf packs of fish that are looking on shallow water bait fish and shallow water bluegill that are just up there, right? And one of my favorite baits to throw up that way would definitely be a buzzbait. I just feel like a buzzbait still day in and day out. Now, shout out to Chris Baumgartner, which is actually in Todd Auten. Todd Auten, if you know anything about the fishing world, and you've been around for a while, when I started bass fishing, when I started fishing professionally, these guys were hammers from Lake Norman area, Wiley. Todd's still fishing for mine, you know, Todd's still doing his thing. Chris, I think he's retired, and he's fishing maybe around Norman a little bit as well. I don't even know, to be honest with you. Let me know if you guys know what Chris Baumgartner is doing right now. But I feel like these guys were pioneers of the buzzbait, and especially putting a toad on the back of it. These guys literally made a trend that we still use today. And the reason it really started all on Lake Wiley and Lake Norman. So shouting out those guys that really started that trend is something that I always want to like, hats off. And they would just go and they'd throw that. I want to say it was Todd that started it, but they were good. They were really good friends, sort of like DC and I and Mark and Adrian. You know what I'm saying? Like the key with a toad and just being able to put a toad on a buzzbait. This is an accent buzzbait with a bigger blade. That's the one I like to throw the most, just because I feel like I have more lift and I have more commotion. There's times when subtle is better. Throwing a smaller, more finesse buzzbait, I have a smaller blade. There's times I'll do that. Day in and day out, I'm gonna pick this guy up because if it's windy, I'm gonna be able to cover water, be fairly efficient. And the advantage of basically putting a toad on the buzzbait was two different things. One, a lot of these guys were skipping it and casting it a little bit more efficiently around boat docks and around cover. So they were just more efficient because you were adding a lot of weight to that buzzbait to be able to make roll casts in those areas. Two, now you're adding plastic for that fish to grab a hold of. Like if you grab a skirt and you see a bass grab a skirt, like I played with this in a tank at like the Indie Boat Sport and Travel Show. I threw a buzzbait with no hook on it with just a skirt on it, and the fish would come up and they would just go and they'd let it go. Like they would let it go quick. Then I would go ahead and I'd put the skirt and I'd put a plastic on there, say like a craw. The fish would come up, hold on to it, swim around with it for 5 or 10 seconds, and then spit it out. Do the same thing with a toad. Cut the hook off, they come up, bite it, hold on to it for a second, swim around, probably for 10 seconds, and they eventually spit it out. The key was that the soft plastic allowed for them to have something to hold on to rather than that skirt, and they could hold on to the bait better. That was the reasoning behind, like to me, that really sort of, that light switch turned on, and I'm like, oh, that's a huge benefit. I've actually had times where I've thrown a buzzbait, they blow up on it, I cast my buzzbait back in there and let it fall because it sort of falls like this, and they'll come over there and eat the toad. I'm not saying that you gotta have a toad. Now, I will say, this is the accent buzzbait. I'll show you real quick here. It's not as pretty. If I'm threading a bait on there like a toad, I actually take a pair of pliers and I'll cut off a little bit of lead on each side, okay? Like I did right there to make them a little bit more rounded. So that's when I'm actually threading a toad on there. Then that way it doesn't split your toad. And then your hook point gets further back in the overall buzz bait. So it goes further back in there, which allows for you to have more compact bait, number one. Also, two, obviously your further hook point being further back, so if they nip it a little bit more, your hook point's further back into the bait. The deal, I throw that 40-pound Suffix 832 braid. This is a Craw DC. Not my favorite reel for skipping, but it seems like it's been a good reel. It's been consistent. I do like the way that these power grips that Shimano has, they're a little bit more bulky. I like that. I want to hear your guys' opinion on that. Like, do you like bulky handles? Do you not like those bulkier handles? You like more like low profile? Drop a comment on that one too, because I'm looking through reels, I'm playing through reels and stuff, and I have a Cast King, a Duckett, a Shimano, a Abu, another Shimano, another Cast King. I have a whole bunch of plethora of reels right now, and so I want to hear you guys' opinion on this. Let me know, bulky handles like these ones, or do you like them a little bit more low profile? Let me know. Now, as far as color goes in the buzzbait, black on black is what I had tied on. I like it a little bit more dirtier water, but there's like when it's a little stained, I like black on black. But like when it's cleaner, I'm probably going with a silver blade. I'm probably going to go with like more of like a watermelon candy toad. So that being said, let's talk about, I talked a little bit about where I was going to focus on. Some of these shorter pockets, some of those areas, maybe in some of the backs of the creeks. Probably not enormous. I'm going to focus as much in the backs of the creek, but like say in the back of Mountain Creek, you're going to have a little more stained water in the backs of those creeks, and the further in the backs of these creeks, you're going to have a little bit more dinge. So that's where I throw that black buzzbait. On the main lake, where the water's cleaner, I might be a little bit more low-key about it, right? I might throw the finesse buzzbait with a more watermelon candy. So just depends. Or if I'm going up the river, sliding up the river into some of these bigger creeks up here, that's when I'm going to transition a little bit too, to where maybe I am throwing a black buzzbait. It's a little bit more stained in those areas, has more largemouth in some of those areas. There's still some big spotted bass that'll roam shallow and do their thing as well. That being said, a buzzbait's always a good one. Also, can't go wrong with a claptail. Still not out yet. I'll keep you guys posted on when that comes in. Just wasn't going to talk about it 2 times in a row when they're not out yet, and I just don't want to. It's like dangling a carrot in front of a horse. Like, you can't get them, so I'm not going to tell you guys to go get them because I don't have that many of them yet. So when that happens, I will let you know. It is an awesome bait. So we'll have a lot of content talking about what you need to do, all this stuff. But anyway, on the spinning rod side, I do want to talk about more of the finesse application because there's a lot of spotted bass in this lake, or you're in smallmouth country, or if the fish are on thread fin shad. That's when I'm going to transition to more of the Mooch minnow, okay? Electric shad has become one of my favorite colors day in and day out. I don't know why. I've always been a gizzard shad kick. Electric shad recently I've been on that electric shad kick hardcore. There's 2 things that did tie a loop knot on him as well. 12-pound Suffix fluorocarbon right here. And so for me, and this is prototype line as well. Guys, you know, I got to always check on prototype stuff. This is prototype line. There's a lot of prototyping going on because I got to make sure it works. Then if it doesn't work, you're like, yo, do not come out with that. Or you're just like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Get me 10 more spools of it. When are we coming out with it? Always working on stuff behind the scenes. The crew at Sufix really has stepped their game up over the last few years. If you haven't used some of their braided lines and some of their fluorocarbons, give them a shot. They're definitely stepping their game up every single year. I'm glad to be a part of that team working to make that happen, right? On the Mooch minnow side of things, okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit about this. I don't really go super far in depth on these top baits of the month into like minnow fishing at all, because I feel like the majority of the people that watch this are just trying to get an understanding of what they need to utilize for their lakes. I don't know how many of them have forward facing sonar, don't have forward facing sonar, so I don't go super far in depth on this, but I'm gonna give you guys some goods right here. So when you're minnow fishing, general minnow fishing, so a Mooch minnow is it's about 3.5 inches long, right? 3.5 inches long, doesn't have as much body to it. It is TPE, so it's going to be like super durable. About the extent of the heaviest head that you're going to want put on a Mooch minnow when you're still wanting to get this rolling action that you hear that's so unbelievable all the time, right? It is. I mean, it does catch them. The most you're going to want to use is a 1/4 if you're still trying to get a little bit of that rock. The cool thing about a Mooch minnow is this. If you take any bait, just a fluke style bait, right, with a tail, when you put a 1/4 or a 3/8 on a bait like this, or on a regular fluke style bait, he just has that straight tail, and then you shake him and all he does is this. It looks pretty non-realistic is the best way to put it. That's when I transition. So if the fish are deeper, that is when I'll transition. If I'm throwing a 3/8 or a half and the fish are deeper in schools, I'll use a Mooch minnow and I'll start reeling it, because this tail back here doesn't have as much resistance, and I can reel him like pop him, reel him, and that sucker's just back there is going like this. High frequency, exactly like a shad. So that was the reason why I designed the Mooch minnow in the first place, was to try to really show you guys different option that would work in several instances, if you will. That's what it is. 3/16 ounce of BMC tungsten jig head. That's what I like a lot. I will say there's times I'll take that hook right there and I'll bend him up just a smidge. That just gives you more bite between that line tie and that hook point. And I'm gonna give up some game. Ooh. Give you guys up some game right here. If you want more roll out of your bait, because you have a little bit of resistance in the back of your bait, what I'll do is, if I want more roll and just a really, really subtle action in the back, I'll take that bottom tab, just the bottom tab off. Not both, the bottom. And what that allows it to do is that top tab still is catching water and still is going like this. Say like a regular Mooch minnow is like this, where like that, now it's really tight, but it has less resistance. So then you're going to get more of an exaggerated roll with that kick. That's money in the bank. I'm just telling you right now. You can always tweak your baits. There's always room for that, but he's a bad little dude. Where am I going to throw this bait? 3 different things I'm going to do. 1, I'm going to fish this around brush piles and rock and that kind of stuff that is like even up there around points and some of those like areas where these fish are going to be setting up on. Okay, here's a creek channel. Great position right here. Creek channel right here. Major shoal right here. I'm going to get out here. Are there fish floating around? Is there bait out in the middle? Okay, they're not. Let me check up here on the shoal. Okay, there's a big brush pile right there. Boom, throw that Mooch minnow over the top of it. If he comes up there and eats him, boom, catch a few on a specific cover and structure. That's what I'm going to be utilizing there. That guy is sort of what I'm thinking about with a Mooch minnow. You can still use a freeloader. It just depends on like where they're at and what are they focusing on and what works better. There's times a bigger profile bait will work better. There's times a smaller profile bait will work better. So figuring that out on your fishery will be very important. Also, jig head size can matter when they get really, really goofy. So play around with that as well. I'm not going to go super far in depth on it, but that is, I might do like a super in-depth master class this fall on minnow fishing. Dive into it. I mean, just go full plunge, dang polar plunge in that sucker. All right, so that being said, we got through some of these things. I'm going to talk about a bait that does not get utilized and talked about enough this time of year, and that is a jerkbait. I feel like a jerkbait is slept on in the fall. Super slept on. Everybody's talking about top waters. Everybody's talking about, man, you got to have this new minnow. You got to have this. You got to have that, right? To me, a jerkbait is something that I always have tied on, especially in the fall when they transition and they start to get shallower. Typically, there's really 2 colors that I'm going to throw out. Like this color right here is one of my favorites for smallmouth, a little bit more chartreuse on the belly, blue on the back. But a matte shad is still day in and day out the best. This is the Maverick 110. It's the best setup jerkbait that I've thrown personally in that mid, like that small, that 3 to 5 foot, 3 to 6 foot depth zone. Thrown for a jerkbait, it just gets bites, casts well, really erratic, and it comes with like the best stock hooks any jerkbait I've ever bought. Over the counter, ever. Okay. So that, I mean, I'm talking about $50 jerkbaits. Ever does not have hooks like that. The ones I bought on eBay and had shipped everywhere do not have good enough hooks. They do not. These guys, ever best. Now I'm done over exaggerating that, but it's actually legitimate. A jerkbait is definitely one that you want to throw this time of year. The difference is, this time of year specifically, you got to work the heck out of that sucker. It is not for them guys. You go pop, 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 pop. You probably are not going to catch a whole lot. Just going to be honest with you. You probably ain't getting many bites. But this is the key. This is like one of the cases. I'll throw that sucker out there. I'm like, wop, 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 wop. You give very little time for this fish to actually see what it is. In the wintertime, I've always said this, wintertime, bass's IQ levels go down significantly. When that water's above 60 plus 70 degrees, them suckers are smart and they know. And the way they figure out, it's like what a lot of times what happens is they figure out when they're gonna, like they make up their mind, they're gonna bite it, they get up there, and if it keeps moving, they can't see it and they just react and come over there and grab it. Where if it stops, they know and they're just gone. They're not having that. Now in the wintertime, that fish will go up there and like, oh, What's that? Oh, huh. I moved again. Completely different fish. Same bass. Completely different fish. Completely different fish. I'm just telling you right now. They're different. I've always said that they just get dumber, and I feel like that is true because they eat that. Now they're still adjusting and evolve with what they can't and can eat because we have so many fish that are getting caught and released. Move your bait faster. All that being said, I'm rambling a lot in this one, but I'm being very serious. There's a lot of actually factual things that are being said right now. I'm not going through just like oh, this bait's great. I'm telling you exactly what I think. So that's why I say throw the jerk bait, but move it fast. Don't play around. 12-pound line. This is a 6-8 medium. What I like, it's actually a Xenon MGX. Expensive reel, but has been a good reel. Has been a solid reel. Actually held up pretty solid. I've thrown it all year. He seems pretty good too. But yeah, good overall product. A 6-8 jerkbait rod. That's a 2.0. The sucker's seen better days. I had a couple, I don't know what happened to him. He got scuffed up from some. He must have sat in that thing. He must have been in them big old waves out there on Lake Huron getting beat and banged around the bottom. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you. So I'm gonna put this guy right here for a second, and then I'm gonna go transition over here to talk about where I'm gonna be throwing this bait. So here on Lake Norman, one thing that I'm gonna look at is potentially even throwing this on docks. So deeper docks where I think groups of spotted bass are gonna be set up on, brush piles where I feel like I can pull the fish out of, lay downs, brush, docks, wood, all that good stuff. They really like it in the fall. That's something that I'm gonna throw that jerkbait on, okay? If I'm up north, it might be grass flats, edges of grass flats. Even on Toledo Bend, throwing a jerkbait on the edges of the grass. Great place to throw that because you're calling those fish up, getting out of that grass, come up there. They don't see it as much this time of year, but be very mindful. Be able to work that bait pretty fast. If you have forward-facing sonar, then utilize that to understand the demeanor of the fish and what the cadence they want to get to bite it. If you don't, just realize don't give them much time to look at it. I'm just giving you a heads up right now. They ain't going to bite it. They ain't like that. It ain't like dang in March where my boys that used to throw that jerkbait out there, they count, man, I barely put her down there, and they just do. Like, it don't take 15 seconds. That sucker done come all the way up, looked at it down there, swam about a half mile since then. So 15 seconds is way too long. 1 second, 2 second pause, maximum. I am going to mention one thing sort of as a minnow alternative. You're still with me. I know that doesn't always get to this end, so if you are, I do appreciate that. We're going to talk real quick here for a minnow alternative, and that is just a swim bait. Something that gets slept on is throwing a swim bait. 3-inch mare, 2.5-inch mare. Smaller profile bait fish, obviously 2.5. 3-inch if I just wanted something a little bit bigger. This works really well, just casting and winding just the same. I think they actually see it less now, which makes it more effective. So don't sleep on a swim bait. Even still, I have a swim bait tied on. It's just there's times they might want that sucker just reeled, like traditionally. And that body roll, there's times they'll bite it. Sometimes they won't. Figure it out. But definitely don't sleep on that. Last but not least, we're going to talk about what happens in September is you're starting to get some of your cold fronts. You're getting some north winds. Fish are, adjusting. The bait fish are adjusting accordingly. And I feel like that's when fish really start to get on hard cover pretty hard. The key is they're going to really get on that cover better. It's just something about it, whether it's laydowns, it's docks. It's something about hard cover in general. I don't know if it's the warmth of it. I don't know if it's the fact it's brush. It could be a slick log on a flat. For whatever reason, it seems like a lot of the fish, especially if there's no grass in your lake, seems like the fish really start to gravitate towards that kind of cover. And one bait that I start to transition back to is a jig. So I throw a jig a lot in the pre-spawn. I throw a jig a lot offshore, like football jig. I sort of transitioned to like that Bronco bug. I throw a Bronco bug pretty much. I always have a Bronco bug rigged up because there's times when I think it's more efficient to flip a Bronco bug in a laydown than it is a jig. But when you're around a lot of boat docks like you are on Lake Norman, that's when you're more efficient to throw a jig like I have right here than you will be to throw a Bronco bug or your Texas rig because you're gonna be able to skip this thing. It's all one piece. You sort of put your Craw trailer on there and you're ready to roll. Two different things right here. A regular traditional jig like this guy right here, and then I have more of a finesse jig. like this guy right here. Something that I've been playing with is that salted Ned roll on the back of him. If you're a smallmouth fisherman, obviously you'd say, okay, that's pretty cool look goby-like. For sure, for those guys who are throwing fishing in the St. Lawrence, that guy's gonna be unbelievable next year when you put him on the back of a little jig. But I still like it for spotted bass, for smallmouth, for even largemouth when I'm trying to have a little bit more slender profile and a little bit more of a compact profile jig. Not too much going on, not too much action. I think there's sometimes that just having a little spade tail back there doesn't have to have two pinchers on him all the times. I think there's sometimes that is a profile. It's more streamlined, makes it more finessey, if you will, right? So it makes it a little, which in turn is what the whole key is with the finesse jig. This is a Blue Rock jig, company made in Ohio. It's a wire tied skirt, really good jig that I've thrown for a lot of years. It's a 7/16. Caught a lot of bass on them over the years. Really good little jig. Has a pretty stiff weed guard. I like that. Personally, I like a stiffer weed guard because the stiffer the weed guard, the easier, obviously the less chance, and maybe you don't know this, the less chance you're gonna have getting hung up in the brush or the wood or any bit of grass or whatever else. It's going to be a little bit more weedless. The softer the weed guard, obviously you're going to have a little bit more trouble with that. So that's always been the problem with the jig, is it's not the best when you're trying to go over a lot of stuff and you have a soft weed guard and you're in a big laydown. You're way more efficient with like a Bronco bug and a 4-aught hook because you have your hook tucked in there and it goes through that stuff so much better. That's why a lot of times it's better to go with that. But if you had a stiffer weed guard, you can get away with it. Still not as, I won't say is as weedless as like a Texas rig, but it is a better way to go if you have it that way. So that's the guy right there, black, blue, green pumpkin with a black TPE salted Ned roll. That doesn't mean, that's not like, I mean, that's just sort of a finesse jig. Okay, you can fish this out offshore, you can fish it like on points, you could fish it around any little shallow rock in like 8 to 12 foot of water. The fish will start transitioning up there and eating craws. That's when I'm gonna throw this. Even skipping docks, like I'll throw this guy finesse profile. And then I use more of your traditional style jig with like a cleanup crawl on the back, bigger profile, has more skirt, you has more of a softer weed guard. This guy's more of a traditional style, full size body jig. When I'm around a lot of largemouth, I typically go for something like this. When it's sort of a spotted bass, largemouth mix, that's when I go more finessey. Probably on Norman, I'm gonna probably opt for that jig over this one off the rip, unless I just feel like they want a bigger profile. There is times that spotted bass will want a bigger profile as well. So not saying that it always is that way. For me, that's how I feel like it works the best. So 7.3 heavy is what I suggest, or 7.2 medium heavy is what I suggest skipping docks with if you're around. The easiest rod to do with is the 7.2 medium heavy 2.0 Jacob Wheeler rod. That to me is the rod that I like in my series, at least out of the ones I like, or I've thrown, and the ones that I've designed. That's my favorite when it comes down to if I'm really going to be skipping docks all day. 7.2 gives you enough leverage to crack those fish, but also it's short enough to make that roll cast and get it underneath the dock, and it has a fast tip. 7.3 heavy, a little bit different, still has a parabolic action, doesn't have as fast of a tip, so it makes it a little bit more harder to make that cast, right? I'm big on faster gear ratios, at least 7-to-1 gear ratio. This is a Corrado 150 MGL, I think. They have them HG, MGLs. MGL is like the slower gear ratio, I think. Yeah, it's a 6-to-8 to 1 gear ratio. So this is the HG. So this is our 7.4 to 1 gear ratio reel, and it's held up. I mean, this reel's a year old. Use the same reel, so it's good right there. So as far as where am I going to be fishing, two things I'm gonna probably look at. Are they on creek docks, or are they in creek docks, or are they on main river docks? So here's your main river down through here. Are they on the main river docks and the pockets around those? Do I kind of run a lot of that stuff? Or are they on the creek docks, like getting in some of these creeks and fishing some of these flats? I will say the docks on the flats this time of year are typically your better docks. The docks have, like, at least for a jig application, like the jerkbait docks, those fish are spinning on that dock, right? Where these docks, the flatter docks, they're sitting on that dock. You're casting a jig to them. It gets to the dock, and those fish go down to it. Let's say it's 4 or 5 feet. They go down to it and they bite it. So typically I'm not fishing docks that are 20 feet deep with a jig this time of year. I'm fishing docks that are 10 feet or shallower for this application. So creek docks or docks on the main lake. Now Norman's a little bit unique because there is dredged out docks. That is another thing. I'm giving up some game. I'm gonna have boys call me like, what the heck? You guys know it. Like, so there, that is another thing that could potentially happen. But I'm giving up some game on what I think would happen at Norman. So that being said, a jig is something that I'm going to add into my rotation overall, and something that I would highly suggest you do the same. I told you guys a couple of them. I think this one right here is a Randall Tharp one. I haven't thrown him that much. He has a good hook in him. I've just not thrown him that much. So to be honest with you, I've not probably caught a couple fast on him. It looks good, and it has a hand or wire tight skirt. So that being said, month of September, it's here. It's not the easiest month to go catch them, but they're still biting, and somebody's got to catch them. So why couldn't it be? Go out there, put your head down, pick up some of these baits I talked about, and let me know how it's going. Drop a comment below. Let me know the lake that you want me to dive into, or the couple lakes that you want me to dive into coming into October. Man, October we have the Ultimate Angler Championship in Gunnersville. Right now we're technically, while we're filming this, we have 2 days, and we're flying out to South Africa to go fish in the Team USA the USA World Championship. Well, it's not the USA World Championship, it's the World Championship against all these other nations. So a lot of things are going down. I got a team series with the Mark here in a couple of weeks, 35th birthday on the 18th of September. A lot of things going to transpire in this month of September. A lot of good things. So hopefully there's some trophy hoisting and some bass catching. That's all I'm going to say. So thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you guys on the next one.